And like Chase said, we were kind of deviating away little by little, figuring out that we had nothing figured out. And 3 years goes by, and I basically had gotten to the point where I was convinced that this wasn't it for me. And that if we met now, not now, but back then, if we met then, that we wouldn't choose each other.
Mimi and Chase, I had the absolute pleasure of meeting the two of you at Paul Check's house, which was a total random occurrence because I remember really clearly that I was down the beach here in Bali with the family, and my wife actually said, she goes, "Oh, I saw that Paul Check's running a workshop and it's the same dates that you're going to be in the US shooting interviews." And I was like, "No way." So I literally turned around, ran up the beach, got my phone, looked at the dates. I was like, "Oh, these dates work amazingly. I just need to change some flights." I was going to be in Austin. I was like, "I can happily fly over, get to San Diego in time, blah, blah, blah." I rock up at Paul Check's place for a stone stacking workshop, which was super fun. But one of the best things I got out of it was actually meeting the two of you. You are just some really cool people. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this conversation, peeling apart everything. So Mimi and Chase, I just want to say thank you for being here. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We're excited.
So glad to be here. Major props to your wife, that the innate feminine that has the capacity for leaning into her intuition and knowing that this was going to be something that was fruitful for you. That is the power of the feminine right there.
True that. Very true that. So I would love to actually start peeling apart and coming to what the two of you are doing, especially in the context of what you're sharing with the world and what you're bringing forth and creating into the world, and also how the relationship side came together, broke apart, but then came together again, and then is now fruiting so beautifully as well. So run me through. I'm asking for myself right now. Take me through.
Yeah, well, let's bullet point list a couple of the things that we're doing in the world today, and then we can maybe back up and kind of talk about the story of how we got here, right? What we're doing in the world today, we don't love to put, definitions or boxes around it necessarily, but we have a absolutely beautiful and fun podcast called the Medicine Podcast that we've been doing for a little over 2 years now. The idea of this podcast is that there are medicines in this world. We spell medicine without the E on the end, so it's already a little bit of a different kind of medicine. But there are medicines in this world that are outside of the mainstream. It's outside of the narrative that so many of us have walked into in this life experience that are healing. And when we say healing, we mean for relationships. We think that our world is lacking relationships in every context. That's not just with human beings. It's with yourself, it's with your body, it's with the planet. And that as the foundation of our reconciliation story, but also what we are trying to communicate to the world. And we're not professing to be experts by any means, but I think if we can remove ourselves from the transactional nature that is pretty much everything in this world and start to nurture relationships with the things and the ways that we do life, I think we're gonna find ourselves into a place of fulfillment, into a place of alignment with purpose. And that has essentially been the foundation of our business, if you will. It's really our purpose. It's our dream. And what that includes is our podcast, and then medicinal mushrooms, which have been this sort of mascot, this theme of our very adaptogenic love story. We offer 2 different kind of mushroom products. We have a capsuled mushroom immunity supplement that's a derivative off of shiitake mushroom called AHCC. And we have a really sexy, super fun, really only the last couple of months we've come out with this product, mushroom latte called Mushy Love Latte that's loaded with 1 gram of 100% fruiting body mushrooms.
Love this. Okay, already starting to open some doors that I want to be able to walk down into. I know the two of you were together at one point and things happened, you came apart, which was actually the exact same, well, not exact same, but similar story to myself and my wife, where we were actually together as high school sweethearts. And then we actually broke up at 21 years old. And then we got back together, have been married now for over 10 years. Where does mushrooms come together in the bringing back of the relationship?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we should back up. We can get into it really
Yeah.
from the start. And we love telling this story. And every time we do, I feel like there's something else that we unearth. So
Yeah.
this is definitely not rehearsed. It's always kind of vulnerable and
Yeah.
novel every time we say it. But we are childhood sweethearts. Like,
They started dating when we were like barely 16 years old.
I'm talking like we're like suburban kids from the 90s and early 2000s. It's like Dawson's Creek level high school romance. Like it was absolute bliss. We had a drama-free, completely fun, childlike relationship in
Best
in our
friends.
teens. Completely best friends. Fell in love, playing high school sports together, and summers at the lake. And we come from a evangelical Christian community. We went to a Christian school. Church was a part of our life, and in that world, there is a huge emphasis to get married before you even consider living together or starting adult life together. And so, with that, we kind of wrapped up our beautiful childhood romance after college, and as the script suggests, we get married. There's literally this thing called like the ring before spring of your senior year of college. You need to propose to your significant other before you start life. It's like actually a thing.
There's a script.
Yeah. So
oh shit, I did not know that. That's crazy.
Yeah. And so we jump into it. We're like, all right, I guess this is what we do next. We've been together 7 or 8 years as teenagers and in our early 20s. Let's do this thing. So we get married. Beautiful, beautiful wedding up in Priest Lake, Idaho. And we start adult life together. And we get into adult life and realize we actually know nothing about how to be adults, how to have a nurturing, safe, and fruitful marriage. We were child love, like we were in a child archetype that had never really adopted or were even ready for adult responsibilities and adult relationships. And so we spend 1, 2, 3 years slowly deviating away from what was a beautiful foundation of a relationship.
Yeah, we got to the point where both of us were changing in different ways, changing in different aspects, and not necessarily changing for the better, but just kind of exploring kind of how you do in your 20s, where you're like figuring things out. You're figuring yourself out. You're figuring out, what do I believe? What do I want? And, sometimes in our 20s, we go through like rocky stages, and that's hard to do with a partner or a husband or a wife. And it can be confusing if you've had no real tools for healthy communication, healthy dialogue, expressing. We knew nothing about the masculine and feminine energies. We were living in a very reactive state, which is normal for people in their 20s. But we got to this place where we were pretty unbalanced mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of the things. And like Chase said, we were kind of deviating away little by little, figuring out that we had nothing figured out. And 3 years goes by, and I basically had gotten to the point where I was convinced that this wasn't it for me, and that if we met now, not now, but back then, if we met then, that we wouldn't choose each other. And I came to Chase pretty much out of the blue. It was very cold, very harsh, and just told him that we had all these plans to move down to San Diego together. And I told him 2 weeks before we were supposed to move, we had an apartment and everything, like his job was lined up. I was getting my California state dental hygiene license. It was set. And I came to him and was just stone cold, like, I'm not going. I think that we need to separate, but you should still go, was the gist of it. It took a while, those conversations, but ultimately Chase did go down to San Diego. I stayed in Seattle, and we separated. It was very quick. It was blunt. It was harsh. And I'm not proud of how I carried myself, but I've since released, shame around that version of myself that thought that that was what was right. And so we spent 3 years then apart. and going through our own real, very real health challenges is kind of where it started. We both hit hormone rock bottom, clumps of hair falling out. My face was exploding in acne. I had a rash on half my body, zero estrogen in my body. And we both took this approach of like, I'm going to do, and kind of not address the emotional trauma and baggage that's living in me. I'm just not going to look at it. Well, we all know what happens when you do that. It starts to rear its ugly head. It's like, hey, look at me, address me, love me, see me. And neither one of us were doing that. And so we both got very, very sick physically. We're not speaking at this time. And then we both went down our paths of like, I got to figure this shit out. And like, no one is here to help me but me. Like, I have to figure this out. So we start peeling back the layers. I'll speak for myself. I start peeling back the layers. I quit my dental hygiene job, moved back in with my parents at 29 years old, which was a little, kick to the ego. But I knew like, I have to work on me. I have to focus on me. I can't live like this, because I was living with so much shame and resentment and just real hate towards myself of how I carried myself through our marriage and then through the divorce process. So it was a lot of unearthing. And over the course of a year, got a little more balanced and started really like truly trying to love myself and act from a place of, if I loved myself, what would I do? Because I didn't. But if I did, how would I treat myself? What would I do next? And so I kind of operated from that. And it led me down a path of discovering the intelligence and the healing properties of medicinal mushrooms. And I started educating people about this product that we have now called AHCC, which is a really unique immune specialty product. And I started a business and started selling, started educating people about this. And it led me to going to Natural Health, Expo West. It's a natural health expo in Anaheim. And Chase was there. But previously, 3 months before we met up at this expo, we were in the same town. We were from Spokane, Washington as our hometown. And we met up and just wanted to have coffee together and just kind of like almost have like a closing ceremony or like get some closure, because we certainly hadn't in our marriage. And it was just, we had both gotten to this place where it was like, I wish well for you and I want to see how you're doing. And so it was very platonic. It was very friendly. But we show up to this coffee meetup and, it's 3.5 hours of conversation. We close the place down. And I get in my car afterwards and I'm just projectile crying because I didn't realize, I didn't let myself go there, really thinking about how much I missed his soul, my best friend. And my soul recognized his soul. And we were both in this much more balanced place where it was like, you're not the person that I divorced on either end. And it was just very intriguing. I remember, like, I wanted to just learn more about him. So that really sparked conversation with us, just very platonic still. It wasn't like, let's get back together at all. It was just like, man, I'm really glad you're doing well. And then that just led to more conversation, more and more conversation. And then we met up at this expo and we couldn't not be around each other.
Yeah. And these 3 years apart felt like a decade. When we split, it was a hard, clean split. I mean, deleting every picture of 10 years of a relationship, deleting numbers. My background, I'm a CPA. I worked in public accounting and financial consulting. I had a uber masculine occupation. I was on a plane every Monday and Friday. It's part of the reason the marriage never really even got started on a great foot is because I was so distant physically, and it started to leak into our emotional availability, my emotional availability. I was in constant fight or flight. And so when we split, my response to that was, oh yeah, fuck this. I'm going to go crush it. I'm going to be in amazing shape. I'm going to be 26 and single in Southern California. I'm going to make money. I'm going to just absolutely crush it in life. This is going to be the worst decision you've ever made. Like, ego, body, 100 out of 100. And so I leave and I do all the things. I work my ass off. I'm getting promoted in my career. I'm exercising all the time, literally all the time. I'm micromanaging my diet, obsessed with the way that I look, and I get wildly, us completely separate, not talking to each other, have like mirror health issues. I hit adrenal exhaustion at 27 years old. I lose about 30 pounds over the course of 4 or 5 weeks. And I'm sitting there going, holy shit, if this isn't a sign for change, I don't know what is. And so I DIY this thing after striking out with, traditional doctor hormone tests and things of that nature, suggesting I get, start like hormone therapy at 27, which is not necessarily what I want to go into. And I start like, okay, what's this holistic health thing? And I'm looking up all the, at the time, was kind of the godfathers of this space, which is like Sean Stevenson and the Model Health Show. I look up what's like local in my area, and I meet some friends who are actually my coworkers and at now Organifi. And I start learning about holistic health. Drew Canoli, who's the founder, May Steigler, who's the current CEO, just become my friends. And I'm hearing about these things called adaptogens, and some of the most powerful ones being medicinal mushrooms. And so I slowly but surely start chipping away at what has become a mess of my physical well-being. And slowly over time, it transitions into, okay, I'm starting to feel a little bit better physically, but I'm still not there spiritually, mentally. And I'm just a sponge for this personal and spiritual development space. I get deep into Joe Dispenza. I get really deep into like Toltec shamanism and learning from like Don Miguel Ruiz. And I had carried so much bitterness in my body from this divorce that I had not addressed. This is 2 years after the divorce. And it is through medicinal mushrooms and psychedelic mushrooms that I begin to chip away at this forgiveness process and redefining the idea of the forgiveness process. For me, it was, what is the best version of me? Well, the best version of me is not only just moved on, but it's actually rooting for Megan. It is thinking about Megan and hoping for the absolute best. Slowly but surely, I'm actually able to embody this such that when we randomly are able to reconnect over a holiday and very what seems to be organically connect for a conversation about like, how are you doing? We should probably put some closure to this thing that we never really did 3 years ago. And it just led to this like, holy shit, I missed this other version of myself so much. And again, like stars align, we are both working in the same industry, wildly enough: health, wellness, nutraceuticals, supplements, medicinal mushrooms, despite being a dental hygienist and a CPA. And we connect at this expo, and we're hanging out. It's a 4-day expo. Day 3, we find ourselves in Megan's rental car at the end of the expo, and we're starting to get into it. We're like, man, I fucked up. I had no idea what I was doing.
Mhm.
Like, I am so sorry. Like, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what we were. I was so in my own just selfish ego.
I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't know how to tell you what was wrong. I didn't even know what was wrong. There was so much that we spoke to that we never spoke about in our marriage or in the divorce process at all. It was very like, it was like our hearts were like holding hands and like comforting each other at the same time of being like, I'm so sorry I hurt you. And it was really, really emotional and very transformative in that moment, in those series of moments. It was, something was like stirring.
And when we split up, when we were in Seattle, when we divorced and split up, I had seen Megan's eyes and I knew that it was over. Like, there was no sense in even fighting it because I saw the look in her eyes and it was over. And so 3 years later, as we're sitting in this car in Anaheim, California, and I'm about to leave and I'm about to go home, and Megan's about to fly back to Washington where she was living, I grab her by the face. It was like a channeled moment. I wasn't doing this out of some sort of like, strategy. I grabbed her face and I stared at her in the eyes for at least 60 seconds. And I just felt pulled, and I kissed her, and I kissed her face, and I just said, I love you. And that was it. I got in my car and I drove back to San Diego. Megan went back to Washington, and it was like a giant, like, whoa, there's a sequel. There's a sequel to this.
Yeah, it was definitely the best kiss I've ever received in my life. And for any woman who's listening right now, and maybe men too, to some degree, I'm sure, but when you have an embodied, conscious man looking in your eyes, like soul searching, basically, it's very disarming. Because guys look all the time, but to have a guy look at you and like want to see your soul, what's going on in your soul, it was very disarming. It was a lot for me to take in, but it was the best kiss I've ever received. Literally, Disneyland is right behind us. They've got fireworks shooting off behind us. Like, it was like movie, like, what is going on? And then I said it back to him, like, I love you too. And it was one big giant question mark at that point, but I'll sing Chase's praises here for a moment. When we went back to San Diego, I went back to Washington State. He made it very clear that this was important, that this was not some fuckboy strategy. This was real, and we don't have to talk about it right this second, but it is something that I want to revisit with you. And to have that level of clarity and just directness from a man is nourishment for the feminine. And I just was like, oh my God, like, it was so attractive to me that it was like he was pursuing and not just leaving loose ends and leaving, my head in the clouds and like wondering what's going on. He really took the lead on, let's talk about this. Let's figure this out. What happened? What are you feeling? And it was very, very nourishing. So I'll stop there, I guess. But
and long story short, we continue to talk, and it's 6 months later that, after a couple of visits, we call 2019 the summer of love, because Megan was visiting me in Southern California as we were kind of nurturing this thing back together. And in August of 2019, she moved back in.
On our 6th wedding anniversary.
Yeah, actually completely wild. Like, she moved in on
by chance. I was like literally an hour from moving in, and I was like, oh my God, this is our anniversary. It would have been our 6th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
Tarot number 6 is the lovers. Yeah, it was wild.
So we move back in, we go to Burning Man to kick this thing off. What we call part 2 of our relationship. We go to Burning Man literally days after she moved in. And a few months later, we start our business together, and we've been doing this for back together 3.5 years. Our business has been going for about 2.5. And it's been beautiful and adaptogenic, like this theme of mushrooms. It's the thing that brought us back together. It's adaptogenic in nature. It's part of our purpose, and has been this theme and this mascot for really the roller coaster ride that has been our relationship.
Dude, it's really funny. As you were going through that, I kept falling into I'm just listening to a really great story and I'm totally into it. And I was just like, I did write some things down that you kept sparking through, because I felt like there was so much there. So firstly, I just want to say thank you for sharing that. Like, there's beauty to it, but I also really want to recognize the ability of you being able to properly reflect back and then be able to communicate that forward. Like, there is a sense of actually doing the work, is maybe one way to put it, where it comes to like, you've been able to look back and learn as you go through that process, which I find really, really interesting. Mimi, you said something before that is something that's kind of like a bit of a core principle to me, which was like, if I'd love myself, what would I do? And it's really interesting because I work to use that phrase exactly throughout all of my life. Even so, for example, people come on like, Chris, how do I get in shape? You're like, you look amazing. How do I look like you? And I'm like, well, just use one phrase. If I'd love myself, would I go to the gym or stay at home? Would I eat this food or eat something else? Would I take care of it? Do you mean whenever there's options there, if I love myself, would I X or Y, becomes a really easy way to just like partition through the noise and to be able to get some clarity to where it comes to. So I really appreciate you saying that, because I think that's something that's really, really cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say, piggybacking on that, I think the problem or the misconception that a lot of people have is like, I need to love myself first and then I'll make great decisions for myself, or I need to love myself, or when I love myself, I'll do this or that. And this loving yourself concept is somewhere outside of you and it's just kind of floating around and you don't really know how to do it. To truly step into loving yourself, you have to do it before you feel it. And by doing it, you will feel it more. So it's kind of backwards. It's not something to be chased, it's something to embody and then experience.
Yes, I totally agree with that. For my 3 eldest daughters, I do a guided meditation every night to put them to sleep, and a common theme to always finish is me walking them through them feeling self-love. So it's like, it's not them, it's not about them wanting me to be proud of them, it's them being proud of themselves and being in admiration of themselves, and them being able to feel the love for themselves, and then being able to feel I kind of take it from like a Dzogchen non-duality point of view, but it's also a case of like, there is nothing to change right now. There is nothing to do. There is nothing to worry about. There's nothing to think about. There's nothing to plan for. And just being able to sit in that peacefulness, at least, especially before you go to sleep, is I think is something nice to be able to transition across. Completely other side, Chase, you said something that I don't think I've ever publicly shared this. And so I'm going to talk to who the 21-year-old Chris was. And it was something I very much felt at the same time when I broke up with Lauren. When we broke up when we were 21, I don't love that I say this, and especially as a father of 4 daughters, but so here it is. And my thought process at the time was the best way to get over one girl is to get under another. And that was when I got in shape. I started modeling. I was training around the clock. That's like, I soon became a personal trainer before that as well. And I was just like, me. And I very much, I've had to really like work through the shame that I felt for how I acted and treated so many amazing women during that time as well. But it's also something that you said that I was like, oh, dude, I feel that. Like, I totally went through that. I was like, what a prick of a dude that I was, and how I thought. But also maybe coming back around, and even as the 2 of you were sharing a story about when the marriage came together and not being able to like actually work through things or communicate, like still coming to some piece of, we did the best with what we can, with who we are at the time that we're in right then, and being okay with that. And I think there is some level of self-forgiveness. I actually had a while ago, a psychotherapist I was working with recommended a really great book, Radical Self-Forgiveness. And it was profound for me actually going through that and being like, oh my God, there's like obviously being able to forgive others in the world and for anything that can happen, but forgiving myself as well. And it came back to another point that I wrote down, which was self-love. And I think that's something for myself that has been a really big part of working towards, because I kind of like looking back, I felt unworthy in so many aspects of my life. And then being able to come to be like, oh, like, oh, I do love myself. I actually do really like myself in that case. So when it comes to the 2 of you, Chase and Mimi, of being able to get to that point as well, are there any actual like practical things, practices, exercises that you've done so we can actually make kind of this a tangible thing as well for the listener?
Yeah, you going back to what I was speaking on earlier, which is removing the transactional nature amongst relationships in life. And that starts with the relationship with yourself. That starts with the self-love process. I think that so many of us are convinced that if we can execute on a particular formula, we can achieve something. And I think that's done in this kind of self-development space as it pertains to self-love as well. It's like, I will love myself when I get in shape, when I find a beautiful woman who can be my counterpart, when I accumulate enough wealth or business success, then I'll be able to love myself. This is the path to loving myself. I'm going to achieve. That's a very masculine way to approach it. And instead of, this is an act of self-love, exercise, it's always just a perfect example for so many different lanes of life. When can the exercise or the protocol for your diet and nutrition be an act of love in the process? I think so many of us look at it as if it's a means to an end. I will love myself when. And so you go through what can be this exercise of flogging one's self to become worthy in the gym or with your diet, instead of, this is a relationship that I have with my body. This is a relationship that I have with food and movement, such that when I am taking part in these things, I am actually loving oneself. I am loving myself through this process. It is removing, and this is just like a cousin to self-love is presence, and it's awe and bliss of the present moment. And so when we can remove ourselves from an expectation, from being attached to the expectation, maybe it is, I'm attached to loving myself someday. I'm attached to looking a particular way or having a particular thing. When we can remove ourselves from that expectation and sit in the present moment, we're going to be now open to bliss and awe and those moments of, oh my God, I don't know why, but I am filled. I am fulfilled and satiated. When we put our consciousness too far on the future, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have goals and dreams, but if you remove yourself from the specifics of what you're attached to, you're going to open yourself up for so much more capacity to experience the present moment. And that includes this feeling of like, damn it, you know what? I'm enough. Like, I'm enough just today. And so I think just a mindset shift is like, self-love can literally be in what you previously considered to be the route to self-love. It can be these acts of, and in our case, so much has been health and wellness, but it can be like in a bunch of different lanes as well.
Yeah, I have 3 different tangible tools that definitely helped me in this process, because I just want to encourage anyone, like, the levels of learning and consciousness, first you're completely unaware that you don't know. You're unconsciously incompetent. And then something happens where you realize, oh, maybe I don't know. I don't know. And you realize I don't know what I don't know. And so you're in the state of consciously incompetent. And so then that's about acquiring the tools to become unconsciously competent, where you're working on things and you want to get to the point where it's just second nature, where you don't have to think about every single little movement and act and everything. But that whole process can be a year or 5 years or 10 years. So first, I would just say patience, that it's not a flip of a switch. Even if you know that you need to love yourself more, it's not going to happen overnight. It's the way we get healthy is the same way we get sick, a little bit every day over time. So just first, patience for sure. Then, like, real tangible tools that helped me, I would say first and probably the most simple is, sometimes we're carrying around shame where we feel unworthy, where we don't feel like we're deserving of love. That was something that I was telling myself based on how I left our marriage. I literally told myself, you're a monster and you don't deserve love. No one's ever going to love the real you, because they're not going to see the real you, because you're hiding parts of yourself. So how could a man ever love all of you? Because I'm choosing to hide certain parts of myself. So I think it's important to be vulnerable and share with someone that you love and trust deeply, whether that's a friend or your mother or a sister or whatever it is. Let them know, like, hey, I have something on my heart that I feel like I need to share. And sometimes just the release of sharing your shame or your darkness that has been expressed in the past, that maybe you're holding on to some level of shame about, being able to speak that and release that, like, I can't tell you how transformative that was for me. It was like a 40-pound weight got lifted off my chest when I shared with my best girlfriend, like, hey, this is what happened in our marriage. And she was like, okay, well, I still love you. And then she shared something with me that was really, really deep and dark that she was holding on shame to. So you can have these moments with people that you trust and love where you're getting this feedback that, like, yeah, okay, but I still love you. You're still lovable. So that's like a small thing, but it can have profound results. Then I would say, recognizing certain circumstances in your life, whether they were in your control or outside of your control, that you're holding on some level of unworthiness or shame to attach to them, realizing that those can be catalysts for you evolving and completely changing your life. But we have to make it so. We have to choose that, where we come to a fork in the road where we realize, okay, I got divorced. That wasn't great. This is going to be a major catalyst for me where I get to choose now. Do I want to continue to be in victim mindset and be reactive to my surroundings, to my environment? Or do I want to take ownership of my situation, even if, I wasn't at fault or whatever? I want to take ownership, whether that's in health, in spirituality, in relationship. I am taking as much ownership and control of what I can control in my life. And we can control a lot. We like to say that we're completely out of control, but we can control a lot. And that comes down to our daily decisions. So realizing that you have this fork in the road where you get to decide. And then something also that helped me is this, what I call a table meditation, where just get still, get quiet, sit, and just start breathing, and imagine you're sitting at like a large dinner table, like a banquet table. And then start to imagine different versions of yourself that you've expressed in life, all good, or all the good and the bad, quote unquote bad, the dark parts of ourself. Imagine different expressions of who you are at different times in your life, and realize that they're all you and that they all deserve a seat at the table. But you can choose to express or not express different aspects of yourself. So it's like an acceptance of everything that you are, everything that has been in the past, and what you currently are. And then choosing, like, I see you, I hear you, I'm learning from you, I love you. I'm going to choose to express this version of myself from here on out. So I think it's a combination of things, but that's certainly something that helped me, where I'm literally visualizing myself at 26 making horrible decisions in our marriage, seeing her, seeing the pain that was going on inside of her, and having empathy towards that version of myself. When you can't get straight to self-love, try to get to empathy first. And that it can be a major gateway drug to experiencing love for yourself, is curiosity, compassion, and empathy for those versions of yourself that were doing the best that they could at the time, but now you get to choose something different.
I really appreciate that. And I really love that. And what comes up for me as well is the case of the responsibility and power that comes from self-authoring, like you deciding what the story is. And it's funny because I've really been going through this recently, as in, especially through selling the company. I was like, what's the story I'm going to want to tell myself later on down the track with how I showed up, how I became that I needed to be throughout this process. And I use that often to try and be like, okay, what's the story I'm going to tell myself of this right now? Because that's, I dare say that's one of the most important things, because that's how we're going to reflect back on life at the end of the day. And it's empowering, at least for me, it's empowering to know that I can start crafting the story of what is happening in the here and now, and being able to take that then through for the rest of my life, for the rest of my day. And so when it comes to the two of you now, and this is something I think we were slightly talking about that popped up before we hit record, and that was like the labels that we put on ourselves. What are the labels and stories that the two of you are telling yourself now as you want to be able to move forward into the life that you want to move into?
Yeah, that's a freaking great question. And we're so obsessed with defining things in this life so that we can understand them and control them and not be scared by them. And so we're all so quick to define. And I loved your point about that question, that very question. What's the story that I'm basically crafting now, such that I would have so much pride in retelling it at a later point? And I think one core piece of that is falling in love with the process. We have let's talk about like food, and we've got a million ways to cut corners on consuming food. We can go out and buy it. There's meal replacement, supplements. There's literally meal providing, programs, and all these things are really awesome for a productive life. But if you've ever made and really intentionally and taken your time and made a nice meal and you consume it, even if it doesn't taste like a freaking, 4-star or 5-star restaurant, you lay your head down at night and you're like, damn it, that was the most fulfilling meal because I put every element into this thing, like from my hands. And those themes like apply to where we're at now. I think as we build our business and as we look at creating a legacy and eventually a family, where I'm interested is being a part of every step, because I probably grew up and spent most of my 20s and even my early 30s expecting certain lanes of my life to be provided by something else or someone else who has an expertise in something else. Maybe it's an authority figure. Like we grew up in evangelical Christianity, which was like, hey, if I just like do a couple things, this God guy is going to take care of it and I'll be set. We do the same thing with our government. We do the same thing with the health authorities. And it's this kind of like transactional exchange. And so at least for now, the story that I'm really interested in being able to tell is that we have been a part of the creation of our life and our business and our legacy. And we've been in every corner of that creation. Sure, there is going to be times and places where we need to build a community that can support us. But I'm not particularly interested, nor in my relationship and building this relationship. I'm not necessarily interested in just outsourcing the hell out of it and losing that muscle that's built through the process.
Mimi.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the story, that the new story of part 2 that we want to experience and lay out there, and how are we labeling things. And one aspect of our relationship went kind of like an anchor point when we got together. We shared a little bit. We had a very playful best friend type of young romance, and it was no drama, and it was just bliss. And we know that play is an anchor in our relationship, and we got very sick individually and in relationship when we lost that element of play. And so we know that it's very, very, very important for us. And so we prioritize us in relationship as the center of this wheel of our life. And when we prioritize that as the hub, everything else in life flourishes. So for me, kind of a mantra I'm adopting and really meditating on these days is the more fun we have, ... The more fun we have, the better our relationship is. Yeah. The more fun we have, the more money we make. The more fun we have, the closer we grow to God or the divine. The more fun we have, how do we craft a life where we love every element and we're injecting fun and play even into our work that's hard work. Being an entrepreneur is really hard work. It's intense sometimes. But how do we craft this with the foundation and just inject fun and play into the soil of our life? And how far and wide and deep can we go when play is the main nutrient? And so that for me is where I'm living these days, and how I'm sort of crafting my personal story and ours.
It's so critical. Like for us, we have just such a connection, but we both have a tendency to get way too serious, like way too dialed in. We're both type 3 achiever Enneagrams, like we're super driven. But we're also like this innately playful couple,
Goofy,
but we
yeah.
can lose that quickly.
Yeah.
And for us, like sex, for instance, if we're not playful in our life, the sexual chemistry is going to be gone.
Mm.
And so like we love to say all the time, like, how can we make love all day? Like
Mhm.
how can we be making love all day? And the critical nutrient for that for us is fun and is play. So I'm so glad you brought that up. It can be anything from a fart joke to like playfulness, like we're 16 years old, like playing grab ass. It can be really, really simple, and it's how you do the small things that trickle into then when big decisions come up, when big life decisions come up, or you go into the bedroom to have intimate connection, that it's those little things that have been the foreplay for your life, such that when things climax, it's fulfilling.
I I love that you both bring that up, and this is where I've just got to be a straight shooter and be like, that has been one of my biggest failings is
Mm.
the play part. Like I've been serious Sam for far too long, and especially so it's something I've been thinking a lot about recently, especially because from recording, it'll be public news by the time this comes out, but from recording, there's only less than 2 weeks. And I mean, I've exited the company. And then I literally like, I'm in a place in my life where I don't have to work for money. I'm in financial freedom. I have a good idea with what I want to be doing moving forward, this being a very big part of it, which is simply me just having great conversations with amazing people and just wanting to share this and me wanting to learn selfishly and to be able to share moving forward. And looking back, when I was like, what's a story I'm going to tell myself? Looking back, I was like, did I enjoy a lot of what I just went through? I don't know if that is. And so from a personal standpoint, because a lot of people have been like, how, like the few people that I've actually told are like, how are you going to celebrate? And I was like, I don't know. Like even my birthday this year, I didn't even celebrate my birthday. I didn't tell a lot of my great friends around here because I was just like, we'll go out for dinner as a family, and because I want the girls to be able to have a great time, and I want them to be joyful. But I did myself a really big disservice by just being like, no, and just like shoving myself under the carpet. And I said to my wife, I was like, it feels like I've been adulting way too much, way too much, and that's a part of me where I'm like, oh, that sucks, Chris. So I appreciate you saying that because that helps me bring that back out. Like that brings that to my attention and intention for me to be able to like do something about it. So if I may ask for a friendly request, please kick me up the ass to ensure that I do that. That would be gratefully appreciated.
Yeah, one of the things we talk about often is the difference between the spark. We talk about relationships often on our show, and the difference between the spark, the relationship spark, that moment when you meet somebody and it's unicorns and rainbows and butterflies, different from how to keep the spark alive in long-term relationship. It's a topic, it's a question we get often, it's a topic we talk about a lot. And I think play and fun is just a key element to, these conversations. And the spark, like lightning strikes, it's random, it's seemingly happenstance, and it's amazing and it's beautiful. But as this thing dims, it takes a different set of tools with similar themes, play and fun being one of them, to keep the spark alive, to nurture the flame. And something that is a critical nutrient to this element, and I think this applies not just to romantic relationships, but to your livelihood or to your purpose or to your passion. People like us, and it may be for you too, Chris, you'll have a moment that is fulfilling or fun, and you start to strategize how you can recreate that. How can I systematize this such that I can repeat the fun later? And it's this very masculine way of doing things inside the box. So removing yourself from that, because to repeat the steps of something that was novel and it was beautiful because it was novel would therefore lead you to something that's not novel because it's already happened. How crazy somebody like me who will just ritualize freaking everything until it feels like an obligation. Things that were blissful, things that were fun, I'll turn it into a protocol. And then 3 months goes by and I feel like I'm chained to this protocol. And so the key attributes of the spark, play, novelty, can be repackaged and reformatted to keep the spark alive. And I would say the same thing in life and business and purpose, is that what's the thing behind the thing? We talk about the thing behind the thing often, and that's okay. It wasn't that the literal place of us having fun in Hawaii on the beach, drinking Mai Tais. It wasn't that, it was the thing behind the thing where we were in a new environment. We hadn't been there before. We were in deep conversation.
Present.
Present. How do we reposition that in a way that there's a new set and setting, but the thing behind the thing is still consistent? So like even something practically that we do in our life is once a week, we take a couple hours out of our work day to date each other. We do it on Thursday every week. We call it Thursdate. And we literally recreate places such that we can have deep connection that are novel, that include something like nature. And it feels like play. It feels like fun. And it's the nutrient that helps us keep a spark alive.
Love that. I love that. It's interesting. Lauren and I, we usually have date nights, but with the kind of chapter that we're in right now, especially with our youngest, Noah being 8 months, we changed tacks. And so actually like our date nights have now become mornings where we actually go have a sauna and an ice bath, do a couple of cycles together, then sit in the sun, having a coffee, just like sit there being. And it's just so simple, so nourishing, like just to be there, present, doing something that we both really enjoy. And that's been something where Lauren said to me last night, she's like, whenever I wake up and I know that it's date morning, she's like, I'm kicking myself out of bed. And I'm like, super. And I felt so appreciated that she wanted that as well. And I was just like, oh, wow, that's really nourishing that my partner, my wife, she's feeling like that, being able to have this time together. Which actually, it brings up something that you said before, Chase, that I want to dig into a little bit more. And Mimi, I'd really love your input because you were saying how much when Chase was clearly very decisive when it came actually at that point of you two coming back together. I feel like there is a huge lack of decisiveness from so many people when it comes to them living their lives and taking responsibility for themselves. And it's something I want to help propagate. And I would love you to be able to talk to the importance of how you have decisiveness within yourself, Chase, and then how you see, and if maybe I'm more than happy just to speak to males, because I think that's clearly a characteristic that I think is important in everyone, but especially as a male to be able to be like, no, like this is what I want. And especially when it comes to, I just read an amazing book called Death of a Hero, Birth of a Soul. And he talks to, you'd love this.
Writing this down.
And it's been really, really great for me. I'm reading it for a second time going through. So, and it talks about the stages of a male in his life. So if we just talk to a male in his life, it will be like, I forget what a child's called, a page, knight, prince, king, sage.
Okay.
Which has been really interesting because I was having some conversations with some people, and the man that put me onto this book goes, you're going through the tunnel, which is going from late prince to king. And it's very interesting how everything in life has started to happen the way that's happened, the sale of the business, all of these other things. And I was just like, oh my God, like, and it was like extreme turmoil of everything getting uprooted. And for me, it was like, a king must sit in his decisiveness. I think that's one of the key elements from there. So Chase, how does this come up for you?
Yeah, no, this is a sweet topic, and it's crazy relevant. And I think masculinity at large is just in a really interesting place. And I'm going to say masculinity, mostly referring to men, but obviously open to the fact that there's, women who embody masculinity or have a dominant masculine essence. But speaking to masculinity, I think we're in a weird time where, we've had generations of just very limited mentors that embody balanced masculinity to look up to, whether that means absentee fathers or that means just completely dominant, tyrannical authority that has been the male model to look up to. And so we're in this kind of weird place where it's like, one, I don't know what healthy direction-led masculinity looks like. And I'm a little worried in this landscape of 2022 to be decisive and be direct and be penetrating, which are innately masculine, because I might get, I don't know, canceled or something. And so it's this really interesting place to be. I think we've lost in our Western culture initiation for men. And that's not a new concept. A lot of people have talked about this. And I think we're in this stage of trying to figure out what the hell that even means. Is it joining a CrossFit gym? Is it going on a sacred hunt and using a bow and arrow? I think some of these can be, and they're really rad. I think people are getting really creative in this space. But like without even some of those more extreme examples, as men and masculine dominant human beings sit and wonder, how do I embody balanced masculinity, the masculinity that's grounded, that's decisive, that is penetrating, but safe, right? We want freedom. Masculinity wants freedom, and these are the attributes that can lead us towards that freedom when they're applied with safety. And I think about codependency a lot in this, and I think that we've been a codependent world for a long time, and in relationship especially. So many of us are looking to have, let's just say it's men, the feminine attribute filled by our partners or our mothers or people in our society. And when it comes to direction and when it comes to leadership, critical component is to have a balanced left brain, a balanced right brain, a balanced masculine and feminine. Why? Because one is intuitive and creative, which is more of a left to right, and the other is direction oriented. It's penetrating, it's progressive. The tough part about being only in your masculine, and I mean your individual balance between masculinity and femininity, is that you might be progressing, but you're completely off because you haven't been intuitively sensing where you should be pointing your arrow, such that you're making progress, but it's completely in the wrong direction. Maybe either dormant, which is so many men, or it's tyrannical, and it's the high chair tyrant archetype of masculinity, which is the patriarch that we are all familiar with. So what's critical is having the feminine. What's beautiful in relationship is that you can find a partner who is able to help you, but this has to be done on your own. So before you engage in relationship and outsource this intuition to somebody else, you have to find that within yourself as a man or as a masculine essence. Even if you are masculine dominant as a male, there is a feminine, intuitive, creative part of yourself that if you don't get in touch with, you will run the risk of your arrow being completely in the wrong direction. So like there is this beautiful practice of finding that creativity, that intuition, such that you can set your sights, set your sails in the correct direction, and thus embody your balanced masculinity and choose that leadership, choose that route. That is amplified when you combine with somebody else. In this case, I'm a man. I've found a beautiful woman who has a balanced masculine with her dominant feminine essence, such that we can co-create this third we call the relationship, and it's more whole. But we are kind of stuck in this spot of like, oh, I'm not totally complete in the way that I look at my left brain or right brain or my masculine or my feminine. I'm going to go find somebody else who can complement me and kind of fix my gaps. The tough part is in relationship, when you change, which heads up, everybody, you're going to change in relationship, those gaps begin to get exposed as the two people evolve. And what used to be complementary is now, a contradiction, and is going to lead to more issues than you started with. So like, as I think about this, I can't help but think about, for your own, direction, your own leadership in masculine energy, to embody and practice the feminine attributes as well, which would be, where do I even set my sights before I just head off into the world?
I really love that. Mimi, how do you feel when this comes up?
I mean, beautifully put, beautifully said. I can say that everything he just spoke to, he embodies. And it's been through work and trial and error and feedback and lots of dialogue and learning, taking the initiative to, when you reach that stage of like, okay, clearly I don't have everything figured out, let me now start to acquire the tools and actually make informed action, like take action steps. And I think if we're speaking directly to the masculine, to men, I agree with you that men are right now, as Chase said, in a tough spot because we're in this sort of transitional stage, and men are being, I think a lot of men are being tentative because, you know, different movements that have come out and people voicing their issues with the quote unquote toxic masculine. And so I think that I want to have empathy for men, that it's not just because they're stupid or lazy. It's they are energetically in this tough spot where it's like, how much do I do? Do I open the door? Do I do this? Do I pay for her? She's an independent woman. Like, it's confusing. And I totally empathize and recognize that. I think if you're a man and you're in that spot where you're like, I don't know how much is too much and I don't know what action step to take. And I think, one, you have to get to the point where you're okay making some mistakes and but learning from them, like not feeling like you have to have everything figured out, but realizing that it's a process. It's going to be trial and error. I'm going to make this decision. I'm going to go confident. I'm going to listen to my intuition. I'm going to be really, you know, on point here. It might not pan out, and that's okay. I'm going to learn from this. And then I would say too, I think something that can be a really helpful tool for a lot of men out there is men's groups, because the masculine in all of us, but men especially, if you're dominant, that's your dominant essence. You need other conscious men around you to push back. That kind of like that iron sharpens iron, where you'll get feedback from the men around you. They'll be able to tell you, like, no, I wouldn't trust you to invest $1 million. And here's why. No, I wouldn't trust you to take my girlfriend home. And here's why. You can be really, you know, you can have some hard truths given back to you, but they can be your mirror and you can learn from them. You know, John Wineland, I don't know if you know of John Wineland, but he's been an amazing teacher. He would be an incredible guest for you. He's been an amazing teacher for us in relationships. He teaches the masculine and feminine dynamic and energy, sexual intimacy. And he's by far been my most revered teacher in this life when it comes to relationships. And he really came up with this concept of, not that he came up with it, he came up in his career with forming thousands of men's groups all over the country. And he speaks to them in a way that they're out in nature and they're going deep. They're showing their emotional side. You're seeing from a conscious, embodied, very masculine man who can probably like hunt with his hands, going deep into his feelings and showing different, deeper layers of himself to the men that he trusts. And so you're getting like a lot of feedback as the masculine from the masculine. And I think it can really inspire a lot of men, and it could be really life-changing. So unfortunately, our society isn't really set up that way, where we, you know, we don't have tribes really. We do kind of have tribes, but it might be like the buddies at the bar watching the football game or whatever, maybe not the most conscious setting, right? So you might have to look into it. You might have to take action steps and realize, I don't know what I don't know. I don't have all the tools. What are some small steps that I can take such that I can start acquiring the tools and putting them into practice? Sometimes I think guys just don't even know where to start. And I think men's groups, conscious men's groups, can really have huge impact.
Absolutely. And that point of like, don't know where to start, just start
Yeah.
something. Momentum is huge for making decisions and for masculinity at large. And again, how you do the little things is how you do the big things. Start paying attention to the little things where you are able to make decisions. Maybe you make decisions in a way that has less magnitude or less risk to start with, and get really familiar with that feedback loop. I'm sure you feel this, but like in business, for instance, having the feedback loop of, I'm taking a little bit of a risk, but I'm going to take note of how it feels when I take this risk. What is my intuition telling me when I'm doing this? Is it a little bit of anxiety because I have to maybe extend myself? Or is it like legitimate shame? Because those are two very different things. If you can start getting familiar with how you feel when you take a little bit of risk, and then note when it turns into something that you are intending or something that it's not, and it has consequences, you're going to get familiar with that type of feeling in your body. And I think that if you lean into the small things to begin with a little tiny bit of risk, you will be more equipped and more familiar with the intuitive signals that your body, or what Paul Chek would say, your soul, is giving you when you are facing a more intense decision.
I love that. And that, me reflecting back on what you just said as well, and really thinking about, I used to say and aloud and to myself, I have terrible intuition. I was playing that story to myself for a very long time. And it's very interesting now because I can confidently say to myself, I have a great intuition. And it's, especially if we just use, say, the landscape of business as an example, I'll use the term spidey senses. I'll be like, spidey senses are telling me something right now. And it was really interesting because most recent example, 3 weeks ago, I was, okay, so it was about 8 o'clock at night time. And I've just broken down to my wife. I'm there crying. I was like, I've had suicidal ideation all day. I'm in a really dark place. Like, and it was bad. And I was like, I feel totally out of alignment. Like I just know. And there was like, that was the intuition of just being like, nope, like you need to get off. And it's like the pain teacher, do you know, the pain teacher comes on and goes, dude, come on. Like, I'm trying to tell you something right now. You need to get back in line. And it was 16 hours from me breaking down that I had the LOI for the business side. And it was like, I knew immediately what to do. I knew immediately how to execute it. I knew immediately every word that had to come out of my mouth and what I needed to do to be able to have that done. And it was just like instantaneous. And so for me, I think it's interesting because you said something I just want to hammer this home so much, Chase, when it really comes down to like, listen to yourself, feel yourself when you're making a decision and trying to go deep and be like, what is that? And that does take a great degree of awareness and presence to be able to do that. But I promise you, if a meathead like me can cultivate something like this, I know everyone listening can do the exact same thing as well. I have a high degree of confidence in that because I used to be someone that wanted to control, that wanted to have the sense of control. And especially when it came into, do you know what I mean? I'm 35 now. Throughout my 20s and early 30s, I was like, dude, show me where to run. I'll run through walls and I will make that happen. Do you know what I mean? I will conquer. I will do it. I will eat glass. I will bash my head against the wall, but I will get the job done at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That tactic and strategy only gets you so far. And that's where I had to mature, hopefully, to the point of being like, oh, no, things can become much easier, and almost feeling a sense of harmony between grit and grace, where it's like, I can harmonize between these two things. Do you know what I mean? Like, I still have the warrior in me if it need be, but I'd rather be more of a wizard if I could be perfectly honest. I'd rather transition to that. I have a great friend, Dane, and he was talking about like the different like archetypes, for example, like in business. And it was like, you have a employee, then you have a manager, then you have like an owner, entrepreneur, investor, wizard. And it was really interesting because he was like, if you feel like you're working too hard in the business, you're a shit wizard. And I was like, oh, that's really good. Like, you're just not bringing forth, because there are times to be able to grind. But there are other times where there just calls for more grace as well. So I appreciate you saying that. I think that's really, really good.
Yeah, no, well put.
Okay, I've got to bring this up because I wrote this down a little while ago, and I think this is absolutely beautiful. And it came up again with what you were saying before, Mimi, and that was growth in a relationship. And I think going back to the relationship is kind of like the talking point, where being in a relationship, you're naturally individually going to grow and grow in different directions. And maybe that growth means you're starting to come apart. And especially with my relationship with Lauren, I see a lot of times where there's like, the growth is kind of like, it's starting to kind of put more space between us. But there are also things that bring us back together, and there's this weaving. And I'd love to know how the two of you feel when it comes to this, because for me, I feel extremely grateful that this relationship that I've had with Lauren is so amazing and continues to get better and better every day, but also knowing that I never want to take it for granted. And I also know that it is a possibility that one day she may wake up and be like, do you know what I mean? The journey has come to an end here. Or I could feel that one day as well. So I'd just love to know, like, how do you feel when it comes to like the growth of selves and the growth of a relationship together?
Yeah, this is a question in some form or fashion that we get quite often, where it's like maybe one person is growing at a certain rate and the other person isn't growing, or maybe they're growing at a slower rate, or you're kind of at odds. I think it's rare, and maybe I feel blessed in our relationship, but I know it's probably not. I think we're probably the exception rather than the rule, where both people seem to be growing, self-developing spiritually, emotionally, all of that sort of at the same rate. Maybe we're on different paths. We're kind of at the same rate, and it kind of sounds like that's what you and Lauren experience, which is the holy grail. But it's probably rare. I think it's more common that one is growing faster or more interested in self-development than the other, and that's a question that we receive a lot. And I would say that you can't make your partner grow with you. We all want that, of course, but individual growth has to be an individual choice. So when this question comes up often for us, it's not an easy answer. It's not black and white. It's certainly nuanced, but you have to accept that your partner is on a different spiritual path than you are. I tend to subscribe to the notion that we come here, we have multiple lives, that we're doing this earth school thing many, 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 many times. We're learning, we're growing. And Chase's soul chose a similar but completely different path and different lessons for him to learn ahead of time. He decided, I want to learn about forgiveness. Okay, well, you're going to be matched with Mimi, and she's going to give you a great opportunity for you to really step into forgiveness and unconditional love. And so it's like his soul has decided those things, these sacred contracts ahead of time, and that's his stuff. I have my own journey, and I am learning my own lessons. So I know that that's kind of a gray answer, but that's where I start. Is you have to accept that your partner is on a completely different spiritual path, journey, etc. Then from there, I think it comes down to embodiment. If you want to stir your partner into growth or inspire them in some way, it has to be their decision. But oftentimes we are inspired by our partner because we're 24/7, we're together. He sees everything I do, basically. So when I am living embodied in what I am learning spiritually, emotionally, mentally, all these things, when I'm actually putting them into practice and I'm embodying them, it sort of gives your partner this framework and example of when they see the fruits of your work. Like, oh my God, you used to, just an example, you used to be, more critical of me, or whatever that is. And you see your partner changing, you realize that they must be doing something, and whatever they're doing is working, and it's making our life better. So I think embodiment, it's not an easy thing, but that's definitely, I think, the most profound way to keep your paths separate, but also inspire your partner into change with you. It might not be at the same rate, same level, but that's how, and that's really what we all like. If we all did that, if we all embodied all of the spiritual tools that we know, that we've heard of, and we actually embodied them, unconditional love and self-love and all these things, the world would change overnight, right? And so I think remembering different paths and really focusing on you and your embodiment, and not expecting anything from your partner, I think in our experience, those are the most potent avenues to really grow individually and together.
Yeah, we've had the weird fortune / most painful thing in the entire world of getting divorced and having to do life on our own, and being, we were kids who were codependent on our parents, and then we got together at 15, 16, got married. And so when we were 26 and single, it was the first time we were independent. And so now coming back together, there is, and it's still, 3.5 years in, it still feels like this. But when we don't put expectations on our partner, everything feels like a gift. And going back to that codependency thing, it's just so critical to have an independent life, an independent relationship with yourself outside of your romantic relationship. And it's funny, you talked about kind of this place that you're in where you understand that, Lauren might wake up someday and say that the journey's over. And that's such a beautiful place to actually be in, because that's the chance that makes this thing sexy, that makes this thing fun, that it keeps the spark alive, is because you're going to show up every day, not out of fear that it's going to happen, but out of acceptance for that potential. And because of it, I don't know, man, for me, like, I show up a little bit better. We're not remarried. We are technically divorced. We are ex-husband and ex-wife. And there's something about it for me that is this little nudge to be like, you get to be the best version of yourself today. And if the universe still wants Megan to be a part, and I'm like, sure as hell, my ego really hopes that she still wants to be a part of this thing. But there's also an acceptance that I love you enough that even if it had to happen, I can let you go. Like that, it sounds awful in my ego body for sure, but like that's the space that I want to exist in. And it's the difference between marriage in the sense that it's been kind of indoctrinated into all of our minds, which is like, you sign the contract, you're set. It's the life jacket. You've got a life jacket in this ocean of love, and you're going to be fine. But without the life jacket, with the potential to drown, you get to learn how to swim, and you get to learn how to tread water, and you get to learn how to work with the ocean of love by not band-aiding or packaging yourself with this flotation device called marriage. And I'm not trying to shit on marriage or anything. I'm just saying, like, there is this kind of like spell that's cast when you show up every day with the idea of accepting the potential that this may not be forever.
It's like a false safety.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've thought this a few times, and when talking with Lauren about it, and I'd be interested how you think of the two of you now with this kind of thought. And I was like, oh, like, I don't need Lauren, and Lauren doesn't need me. And it's not out of this like lusting need of like, oh, well, if I don't have you, my life turns to shit. It's like, that's not the case at all. Like, I'll be fine. I'll probably turn into a hermit, to be perfectly honest. To me, go be meditating on top of some monastery. But I know she would be perfectly fine. She's such a strong individual woman that like she would thrive. And there's not like this, oh, I need you for me to be whole. It's like, no, I'm whole. Do you know what I mean? And you're whole. So two wholes coming together just make something really cool. So let's do that as well for now. Does that make sense at all?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. And it's something that we're not taught. Like Jerry Maguire got it completely wrong when he said, you complete me. It's like, oh, every girl, is swooning. And it's like, oh, I want a man to say that to me. No, you don't. You don't want a man to say, you complete me, because then he's dependent on you and you showing up as that version of yourself that he thinks completes him. And so we talk about this, unfortunately, it's romanticized, this codependency, and it's normalized in our society. But if we as individuals grow and peel back the layers on ourselves and dig into the darkness and the depths and all of that within ourselves, and we step into our wholeness separately, then those two wholes coming together creates this third that is love, that is consciousness. And that's what we mean when we say, like, our relationship is the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? It creates this third entity of love consciousness. And that's what you can create when you get to a point where you can honestly say, I can't live without you. It's, I can live without you. I just really don't want to.
Yeah.
I choose you.
Yeah.
And
it's a daily choosing.
Yes. No, I agree with that, because I was just about to say, like, as a father to 4 daughters, I very much think about a lot, Janine, what's the example that I'm being? And I read this a little while ago. I forget the book that I read in, and it was like, be the man that you want your daughter to marry. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
what a great example. What a great
Yeah.
example that
Yeah.
puts upon me to live on a day-to-day level. To me, the way that I show up, the way that I treat them, the way that I treat anyone in my world. And I think that's an important thing, especially as a father of 4 daughters. I very much think about how are they going to go and live their lives, and me wanting them to be interdependent and being able to weave the world that they want to be able to weave as well. I think that's cool. And I like that, because especially when, like, Mimi, you're a woman that I see, I'm like, oh, you're an example that I want my daughters to be able to learn from as well. And I look for those so that I can have something to point at and be like, that's great. That's cool. We can learn from that stuff. Like, bravo, let's keep doing that. So I just want to say thank you, because I think that's really, really cool. Like, I think that's
Wow, that's high praise, and I received that. Thank you.
my absolute pleasure. Okay. What's one thing for each of you that you're really expanded about, thinking about what's to come in the future?
That we're really expanded about to come in the future. Well, I'll just be completely honest here, right? For me, I have definitely felt a push, a nudge from my intuition for the first time in my life. I'm 33 years old, and I've never felt like a strong pull or push or whatever to be a mom. I think I will be, but there's some women who know from the age of 13, 14 years old, they're like, oh, I just want to be a mom. That's all I want to do. I just want to be a mom. And they grow up like thinking and feeling that that's their purpose. And that's great. It's beautiful. I never had that. And I'm, like I said, 33 years old, and I'm feeling for the first time this over the last maybe 6 months, really thinking about consciously what kind of home environment do we want to create that would be so nourishing and loving on every level for a child to come into, and just really thinking about that and bringing up conversation. And I've really stepped into reading more books about conscious parenting, and realizing that I had a great childhood, but it wasn't ideal. No one says ideal. Our parents are doing the best that they can, but realizing, okay, that's not how I want to do it in these certain aspects. How can I expand on that? How can I improve that? How could I show up for my future daughter or son the way that maybe I didn't feel showed up for, in my childhood? So for the first time, I'm really, I'm fascinated by all things birth and pregnancy right now. And we're not like trying to get pregnant. This isn't some sort of like announcement or anything like that. For us, it's probably still a few years off, but because it's the most important job in the world, I really want to step into it consciously, not feeling like I'm in way over my head. I don't even know where to start. I'm feeling overwhelmed from the beginning. There's probably going to be some of that. You can't always be ready for everything, I know, but I'm really feeling expanded in that way. Like my maternal something, my maternal sparks are turning on, you could say. And so that's something that I think about, and showing up and thinking about every day, like when I learn, and just being open with Chase and where we're at, what we're thinking, and really wanting to step into that role consciously, and knowing that it's going to transform me and us, and how can we show up as the best, future parents. So that's something that's definitely tugging at me right now, where I feel expanded in a way that I never have.
That's really cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
How about you, Chase?
No, I love that. And of course, I've got like, goals. I want to grow the business, and I want to keep working on my body, and I want to look a particular way, but maybe a little deeper than that. I'm genuinely fascinated by and excited by the opportunity of what this world that we get to be a part of becomes. And I think there's a lot of just chaos going on, but it's all indications of a potential of an opportunity for change and creating, as Charles Eisenstein would say, a more beautiful world we all know is possible, or our hearts know is possible. And I'm genuinely deeply excited about that opportunity. And even things like what we were talking about, before we hit record, about like these relationships that we're building virtually that are so deep, and it's this new kind of family relationship. And I'm excited to be a part of the world that is able to amplify the way that deep connection is made across human beings through something like virtual communities. And as we raise a family and have a child and grow our legacy in life, I'm so excited. I love novelty. So I'm very excited for the novel opportunities to create family and create community in the future of this world. And so maybe that's traveling and podcasting and raising a child and having a community that's not just, the suburbs, but rather this sort of like network, the mycelial network, if you will, and fostering human life and the expression of, divinity through human life in a way that is completely brand new, progressive, and indicative of like real fulfillment. And so, like, what does that practically mean? I think it means raising a family. I think it means having community. I think it means traveling. I think it means blowing up certain systems that are antiquated and being a part of the creation of something new. And so those types of things like really get me fascinated, in addition to just continuing to lean into some of these other kind of like practical goals and dreams that we have.
That's really cool. I really love that. And that obviously vibes with me a lot, especially doing with our daughters. We've homeschooled a lot over the years. We've traveled so much. Like our eldest daughter, Arlo, she's 9. She's done a couple of 100 flights, filled over like 1.5 passports. Like we've traveled so much. We've lived in Dubai. We've lived in Bali. I mean, we're about to do another move. They can not fluently, but can like understand and speak multiple languages. And it does really fascinate me of what's the world like they're going into, and what's the responsibility that we take today to ensure that there is the best possible world. Like William McCaskill actually talks to this. I just read his recent book, which is fantastic. And it was like, we have a responsibility to look after future generations. And that's the case of like, well, what am I doing for not my daughters, but what about their children? And what about their children? And what about their children? And it's so interesting to think of like how grand our actions are today and what the repercussions and where those ripples go as well. I think that's really cool. And I appreciate what the two of you are doing and what the two of you are sharing. This has been amazing. What a great start to the day for me, if I can be perfectly honest. This has been ripping, and I can't wait to be able to get over to San Diego and actually wrap my arms around the two of you and give you a big hug. But I just want to say thank you. I appreciate the two of you a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
What a gift.
And yeah, it was a pleasure.
My absolute pleasure. Now, I want everyone to be able to consume more of exactly what it is that you're doing. So the podcast, the medicine podcast, is there anywhere else that we should go to be able to lap up what you're doing?
Yeah, so themedicin.com, it's MEDICIN, so no E on the end. There you can find our podcast, you can find our immune supplement, you can read more about our story, and then Get Mushy Love is the Mushy Love Latte. So this is a combination of, it doesn't have any caffeine in it, so it's caffeine free, but it's a very luxurious mushroom experience. It's got a full gram of medicinal mushrooms, which is more than anything that we've seen on the market. And it ends up tasting like a liquid cinnamon roll. so you can drink
Oh.
it on its own. Yeah, I know we need to get you
I'm
some.
coming for you.
I
I'm
know.
coming for
Yeah.
you.
We'll send you some for sure. So you can drink it on its own. You can use it as like a cinnamon swirl coffee creamer. It's great with vanilla protein. It tastes like a snickerdoodle. Really, really proud of what we've been able to put out. It took us like a year and a half to get this to market. It's been a complete labor of love, and we could not be happier with the feedback that we're receiving from people. And then, yeah, so that's getmushylove.com. And then I hang out on Instagram a lot. I have a ton of information and education on there about conscious relationships, mushrooms, all that good stuff. And that is, my handle is Mimi_the medicine.
Yeah, and echoing everything, I'm in the same spots. You can find me on Instagram, the Chasen one, the _Chasen_1, or just search Chase Ramey. But yeah, super active. We love talking to people and getting feedback on listeners or anything like that. So,
Yeah, our DM doors are always open.
Yeah.
We love hearing from people. We pride ourselves on answering every DM ourselves, and so we really love connecting with people that way.
Amazing. Well, I invite, I recommend everyone to do exactly that. Mimi, Chase, thank you. You're an absolute blessing, and I appreciate you for coming into my life.
Yeah, likewise.
Such a gift, my friend.
Receive
Thank
it.
you.